very much. Follow that. Thank you very much, Bill, for that, setting the scene for this launch of the Queen Mary Life Sciences Initiative, and for doing so in such an inspirational way. My name's Mike Curtis. I'm the Dean for Dentistry, but I'm also the Deputy Vice Principal for Health. And I'm standing in for Richard Trembath, who sadly can't be with us today. So, it's my role to explain how this Life Sciences Initiative can benefit not only Queen Mary, but specifically, I think, the School of Medicine and Dentistry. And this figure here is one that many of you will be familiar with. It's the biomedical research cycle, which links basic science findings at the bottom of that circle as you go around through diagnosis, population studies, and into actual delivery of those findings into the clinic. And they themselves feed back into that basic science agenda. And I think it's this cycle, if you like, that we feel most optimistic about in regards to this new agenda. Life sciences is a pretty hot topic at the moment. These are the image on the left and in the middle, taken from recent government reports in this area, emphasising the value of life sciences to the economy of the country through industry and academia working together to the benefit of patients. In the centre, a more recent report on how we capitalise on advances in genetics and the potential of genomics to deliver as improved healthcare. And then over on the right-hand side, from the New Statesman, how life sciences could potentially feed into the growth of the UK economy. So it's unsurprising that if you scour around the web and look at all universities in the UK, that you'll find a pretty large presence of life sciences. This is just taken from a couple of our institutions in London and some of the provincial universities further afield, and all of them, if you dig deep enough and not necessarily dig that far, you can find a determination, if you like, to develop a life science agenda within a multi-faculty institution. And you could say, well, given that these universities across the UK are doing this and are heavily engaged in it and promoting it, where does that leave Queen Mary? Are we late off the starting blocks in doing this? And I've got three reasons why I think that isn't the case. Three reasons that I think we're in a unique position to develop a really international program in life sciences. And the first one, not to sound too much like an estate agent, is location. The map on the left-hand side shows the location of our four main campuses out here at Mile End, heading west to Whitechapel, further west to Charterhouse Square, and finally landing in Holborn. And the image on the right-hand side, if you stood on a very tall ladder somewhere around about Holborn, that's the kind of view you get looking east. And you start by looking out over the city, one of the most prosperous and wealthy areas of the United Kingdom. And you can see beyond the Mile End Road, past the Royal London Hospital, I hope you can see that, the blue building in the centre there, out to the Olympic Park with the new Olympic Stadium. And Bill reminded us of population growth in London. Well, on that Olympic Park, just over the next 10 years, we're expecting a growth of around about 40,000 individuals. The range of population that this university serves locally in our hospitals and medical schools and dental schools serve is an extraordinary range of population wealth and population social conditions. This shows this in a bit more detail. The darker red boroughs on this map are those that are most socially deprived And it's no secret that the boroughs of Newham, Hackney, Tower Hamlets are amongst the most deprived boroughs in the United Kingdom. That has been this way for over 100 years and beyond, and it provides a fantastic clinical resource for the kind of studies that have been proposed as part of our life sciences initiative. The map on the right-hand side I'll come back to later on, but that indicates the density in our adjacent boroughs of our Bangladesh Asian population, which again shows that in some areas it's up to 50% of those boroughs' population. The last area I think that we can be rightly proud of and say that differentiates us from many other universities is our engagement. Our engagement with our public, our engagement with our schools, and our engagement with the opinion leaders, if you like, in our local communities and beyond. That's important. That's really important for the nature of the studies that we wish to do. As Bill explained, in order to do these kinds of studies, you need full engagement with your local population in order to properly phenotype individuals and to take maximum benefit from our patient population. We need a way of communicating and accessing those groups of individuals. And I think we're in an extraordinary place, largely because of the history of this institution, which was essentially based on an engagement exercise when it initially started out as People's Path. And that's led to some really fantastic high-profile engagement projects across all three of our faculties. So computer science for fun, in science and engineering faculty, Centre of the Cell has already been mentioned in the School of Medicine and Dentistry, and then my own group and People's Palace, two really high-profile engagement projects based in humanities and social science. So I think we've got the kind of cards, we just need a way to deal with them properly. This is where we envisage our engagement expanding on the Whitechapel campus. This is already planned. This is an extension of the Centre of the Cell, which is going to be called Neuron Pod, which will be outside and provide additional space for engagement, particularly with school children through workshops and so on, in a project led by Fran Walker. And the opportunities, I think, that we developed at the Whitechapel site to produce this kind of activity, but on a larger scale, are tremendous. So I'll give you a quick rundown of what's already happening in life sciences across School of Medicine and Dentistry. Of course, our two main campuses. And over on the Charterhouse campus, we've got excellence in cancer through Bart's Cancer Institute, in fact a CRUK Centre of Excellence. A fantastic group of individuals in cardiovascular and inflammation research based in William Harvey. And then a really influential group based in the Wolfson Institute of Preventative Medicine. And I think one of the defining features of how important that group came from our REF return in clinical medicine at the end of last year, where we were obliged under REF guidelines to submit a series of impact case studies. The Wolfson Institute provided disproportionately way higher numbers of impact case studies for our REF return than any other area of the clinical medicine activity we do. And that's because of their leading role in novel epidemiological approaches to the study of health, novel diagnostics, and novel preventative methodologies. And that is actually translated into benefit for the public and populations in general. Over in Whitechapel, the Blizzard Institute, based just behind where we would dearly like to develop this life sciences initiative. Blizzard covers a range of clinical disciplines that are represented in the Royal London Hospital. But I think more importantly, it's now organised into research themes which cover each of those clinical areas, from genomics right the way through to population health. You wouldn't expect me to stand up here without talking about dentistry. £89 million building, soon to be opened, you'll all be invited to the party, with strengths in oral cancer, in hard tissues and biomaterials, through groups that are actually based here on the Mile End campus, adjacent to groups in science and engineering, infection and immunity and population oral health. So that's our current activity. I'm going to finish with an example of a project which could form part of the initial phases of this life sciences initiative. In fact, probably will assist it through funding less from the Wellcome Trust. And before I come to that, this is the overall vision. So we wish to progress excellence in biomedical and translational research and teaching and training relevant to the local population, whilst addressing the challenge of global health and potential for wealth creation. And this will involve an alignment of both our research, education, and public engagement strategies. This is a feel a bit fraudulent standing up here. I know nothing about genetics, but here you go. This is a project led by Richard Trembath, Vice Principal, which at its essence aims to take advantage of a very unusual finding that's come from genetics, genetic analysis of populations so far, which shows that the prevalence of knockouts, or gene knockouts, can be sufficiently high that even with a relatively modest study of populations, you can identify individuals who lack a gene function. And I've just shown down here some examples of how identifying gene knockouts has had some really outstanding benefits to human health. And the one I'll focus on is the one on the right-hand side. This is Timothy Ray Brown, also known as the Berlin patient. And this is significant because CCR5 is a receptor on the surface of immune cells, which HIV uses to enter the immune cells. And individuals who are knockout for CCR5 are at a significantly lower risk of HIV infection, less than 10%. Timothy Ray Brown was an AIDS patient, and he had a bone marrow transplant from a CCR5 knockout individual. So his immune system was essentially restarted with a CCR5 knockout, and he was essentially cured from AIDS. And that finding is based upon an understanding not only of the genetics but of the biology and how to translate that into a clinical setting. This map that I showed you earlier shows you the density of Pakistani and Bangladeshi populations in our local communities. And this is significant because it's thought that the chances of identifying gene knockouts is going to be significantly higher in populations with consanguineous marriage. And so we're in a unique position to examine this population, and through funding from the Wellcome Trust, have embarked on a project which aims to recruit between 20 and 30,000 adults. Apologies for the busyness of this slide, Richard prepared this one. But what it shows you is that a study of this nature involves many of the elements that I talked about earlier, plus a broader involvement of life science activity across the whole institution. So we need public and community engagement in order to engage with the individuals who form part of this major sequencing initiative. We'll need ethics and law and legal studies drawn from humanities and social science to set the kind of context for this research. And we'll need informatics, computing, and along with high throughput sequencing to actually achieve the studies. And lastly, we'll need facilities for clinical phenotyping and experimental medicine in order to properly characterize the individuals who are ultimately identified as being knockouts in this population. This is pilot data from that study, which is pretty extraordinary. This was based, I think, on about 3,000, so 10% of the total. And what it shows you is that within that 3,200 individuals were identified. with knockouts, with a gene knockout. Of those 200, significant number were already targets for drugs. 25% of them have already been used as targets for drugs, so there's a way to experimentally look at those. But perhaps even more surprisingly, of those 200, 20 of them have also been attempted to be knocked out in model organisms, and indeed in mice, 20 of those gene knockouts are lethal. And so our ability to work and look at the function of these genes in experimental animal models is very limited, because in those systems, loss of that gene function is lethal. And therefore, identification of function in humans is actually the only way to do this research. Why do it in East London? Well, I hope I've convinced you that we've got the large and varied ethnic populations that would allow us to do that. We've got a comprehensive electronic health data set. We've got fantastic collaborations. We've got the FAR Institute for patient informatics, links with our local hospitals, and links with centres for sequencing. But in addition to that, links into the population, not only through engagement exercises, but also through over 150 local general practices. As Simon said at the beginning, the potential for redevelopment of the Whitechapel site allows us to think big for this study. And I'd say, in closing, that development of the facilities on the Whitechapel campus for these kinds of studies that would be required to bring this to fruition will be beneficial not only to UK science, to UK industry, but to our local population, to our school children, and to the broader communities